The call came at 2 in the morning, sharp enough to slice through the thin veil of sleep. I wasn't surprised. In my line of work, search and recovery, night calls were part of the deal. Still, something in the dispatcher's voice made my chest tighten before she even finished the sentence. Charter flight went down in the Arctic Circle. Coordinates already transmitted. Weather's holding for now, but it won't last. You're being deployed immediately. I swung my legs out of bed, staring at the frost glistening on the window pane. The Arctic, remote, merciless, and vast enough to swallow anything, including people. Any survivors? I asked, pulling on my boots. A pause. Unknown, but you're not the only team going in. That should have been reassuring. It wasn't. 2 hours later, I was in a hangar lit by buzzing fluorescent lights, staring at the wreck manifest. 12 passengers, 2 crew, private charter, destination unclear, flight plan sketchy. Nothing about it fit the standard template of disaster response. My gut twisted. We lifted off in a military transport, the engines rattling in the frozen air. There were 4 of us, me, our pilot Anders, medic Ramirez, and Holt, a taciturn logistics guy with the kind of stare that didn't blink often enough. No chatter, no nervous jokes, just the steady drone of turbines and the white sheet of dawnless sky outside. Hours later, we descended into the ice fields. The wreck's beacon pulsed weakly on the scanner, guiding us through a world that looked untouched by time. Snow dunes like frozen waves. No landmarks, no signs of life, just endless, blinding white. The plane lay broken across the ice, its fuselage half buried, wings snapped like brittle bones. Smoke still trickled from the ruin, but no fire, just the skeletal aftermath. We disembarked into silence so thick it felt alive. My breath fogged inside the mask. My boots crunched against the snow, each step a reminder of how alone we were out here. Ramirez scanned the fuselage with a thermal reader. No heat signatures, nothing moving. But there were footprints, dozens of them, leading away from the wreck, barely visible, already softening under drifting snow. They weren't frantic or scattered the way panicked survivors should move. They were uniform. A line. Survivors? I asked. Ramirez shook his head. Not like this. We followed the trail toward a ridge, the wind whistling low across the ice. The silence gnawed at me more than the cold. No gulls, no creak of shifting ice, not even the groan of wind against metal. Just the whisper of snow dragging across the field, like something trying not to wake. At the ridge's crest, Holt pointed. There. In the distance, a dark opening yawned in the ice. A cave or fissure, its mouth rimmed with jagged frost. The footprints disappeared inside. I felt something then, something I'd never felt on a recovery before. Not dread, not exactly, more like recognition. As if I'd been here before, though I knew I hadn't. The others moved forward automatically, their figures swallowed by the white. I lingered, staring at the black maw on the ice, and a thought rose unbidden, colder than the wind cutting through my parka. They didn't just survive, they were led. And whatever led them was waiting. The mouth of the ice cave loomed before us, its edges rimmed in frost so thick it looked alive, curling like teeth. A thin wind drifted out, colder than the already brutal air, and with it came a smell that didn't belong in a place of snow and stone. Damp, metallic, the faint reek of rot. We stood at the entrance, the crunch of our boots falling silent. Ramirez lowered his thermal scanner again. Nothing. Just void. That made me uneasy. The device should have at least registered the cave walls, but the screen showed a dead black rectangle, like it refused to acknowledge what was inside. Anders muttered, "No wonder the beacon went dark in there." We switched on our helmet lamps and stepped in. Light struck the ice, refracting into ghostly prisms that rippled along the walls. It should have been beautiful, but the deeper we went, the more it felt like the light wasn't reaching far enough, as though the cave swallowed it whole. The footprints continued. They weren't scattered, weren't hurried. 12 passengers and 2 crew, walking calmly into the dark, step after step, like they knew where they were going. Holt walked ahead, rifle slung across his chest, the beam of his lamp cutting steady lines into the black. These people weren't wandering. They were being guided. Ramirez swallowed. Guided by what? None of us answered. The tunnel sloped downward, narrowing until our shoulders brushed the walls. Ice groaned under our weight, cracking in long, echoing sighs. I ran my glove along the wall and felt grooves, lines gouged into the ice, repeating in patterns, not natural striations, symbols. I stopped. Wait, look at this. The others gathered. Holt's lamp revealed spirals, jagged crosses, and twisting shapes etched with precision, running in bands around the tunnel. Some looked freshly carved, the frost still sharp. Ramirez whispered, "Who the hell would say? Carve these?" I had no answer. We kept moving until the tunnel widened suddenly, opening into a chamber vast enough to swallow a cathedral. Our lights could only catch fragments. Pillars of ice rising like columns, the ceiling lost in shadow. The air was thicker here, harder to breathe. At the center of the chamber lay debris from the plane. Seats, luggage, even a broken wing strut dragged inside as if placed deliberately. Around it, lanterns glowed faintly, our passengers' emergency lights. They flickered, but they hadn't burned out. Someone had arranged them in a ring. And within that ring, something moved. I froze, my light trembling over the scene. A figure sat among the wreckage, head bowed, arms limp. For a moment, hope flared. Survivor. "Hey!" Ramirez called, rushing forward. The figure lifted its head, skin pale as the ice, eyes black and glistening like wet stone. Its mouth opened, but no sound came, only a hiss of air, the kind you hear when a cave breathes. Ramirez stumbled back, hand flying to his weapon. The thing rose slowly to its feet, every joint creaking, not like bone but like frozen branches breaking under strain. And then more shapes stirred beyond it, not one survivor, not two, all of them. The passengers stood in unison, their faces hollowed, their eyes reflecting our light like animals in the dark. None spoke. They only stared, waiting, for what I didn't yet know. But I realized, with sudden clarity, that the wreck wasn't their tomb. It was their offering. None of us moved at first. The chamber was vast, but their stillness filled every corner of it, like statues arranged for some forgotten ritual. 14 figures in total, 12 passengers, 2 crew, each standing inside the pale glow of the lantern circle. Ramirez whispered, "Jesus Christ, they're alive." But I knew the truth before the words left his mouth. Alive wasn't the right word. One of them, a woman in a parka torn down the arm, took a single step forward. Her boots crunched faintly against the ice. The movement was smooth, too smooth, like a puppet tugged on invisible strings. Her mouth opened wide, lips tearing at the corners, and a sound spilled out. It wasn't speech. It wasn't even a scream. It was the cave itself breathing through her, a low groan that made my teeth ache. The others joined in one by one until the chamber was alive with that unholy chorus. Holt raised his rifle. "Permission to fire." "No!" I barked. My voice echoed off the walls, sounding small. "We don't know what they are." Anders muttered, "We know they aren't people anymore." The survivors began to move, not toward us, but around the wreckage, shuffling in precise circular lines. Their boots traced the same grooves I'd seen carved into the tunnel walls, spirals upon spirals, ancient patterns repeating across the ice. Their bodies twitched with each step, synchronized as if bound to the same rhythm. "They're making something," Ramirez breathed. It was true. The circle widened, the survivor's path forming an intricate sigil around the wreckage. The lanterns flared brighter with every pass, casting warped shadows that made the ice itself seem to bend. I felt the pull of it in my chest, like a rope tightening around my ribs. The longer I looked, the harder it became to breathe. I tore my eyes away, focusing on Holt's voice. "We need to move, now." But the exit behind us was no longer empty. A figure stood at the tunnel mouth, not one of the passengers, something else. Its body was obscured by the dark, its outline jagged, shifting. What light reached it seemed to recoil, leaving its form uncertain, as though it were half-formed from the cave itself. The survivors stopped chanting. All at once, they turned their heads toward the figure. Then, as one, they dropped to their knees. The sound that followed wasn't human. The figure exhaled, and frost bloomed across the chamber floor in a spreading wave, cracking beneath our boots. The air grew colder still, impossibly so, the kind of cold that gnawed straight into bone marrow. Anders cursed. "What the hell is that thing?" I didn't answer. My mind couldn't form the words. All I knew was that the footprints leading into the cave hadn't been made by victims stumbling blindly to shelter. They'd been led here, guided to kneel. Holt shouldered his rifle, finger white on the trigger. The figure's head tilted unnaturally, listening. Though it hadn't moved closer, its presence was enough. "Careful," I whispered. "If you shoot, you might wake it." Ramirez's voice cracked. "Wake what?" The floor groaned beneath us, deep and resonant, like something vast turning in its sleep far below. Whatever it was, the survivors were offering themselves to it, and we had just been added to the ritual. The chamber shuddered, ice raining from the ceiling like brittle glass. The survivors remained on their knees, unblinking, their breath misting in steady rhythm as if they shared one lung. The shadowed figure by the tunnel mouth didn't advance, but its presence filled the space, pressing down on us with a weight that made my chest ache. Holt's rifle never wavered. His finger twitched against the trigger. "This ends now," he said. "Don't," I snapped. My throat was raw from the cold, but fear sharpened my voice. "We don't know what happens if you—" The figure inhaled. A sound like cracking glaciers echoed through the chamber, deep and resonant. Holt froze. The rifle barrel dipped an inch. That single breath had stopped him cold, not by choice, but by force. Ramirez muttered, "It's inside us. Jesus Christ, it's inside us." The survivors rose in unison. Their bodies jerked, then flowed, like marionettes tugged by a crueler hand. They resumed their circling, the sigil widening until it stretched nearly wall to wall. With every step, the lanterns brightened, pulsing like a heartbeat. The ice beneath the wreckage began to split, black cracks spiderwebbing outward. Anders stumbled back. "It's opening something." He was right. The lines weren't just drawings, they were a lock, and we were watching it turn. "Out!" I hissed. "We need to get out." We backed toward the tunnel, boots crunching on fresh frost. The figure didn't move to stop us. It only tilted its head again, as though amused, as though we weren't a threat at all. That, somehow, was worse. Halfway to the exit, Holt whispered, "Look." The wreckage in the center of the chamber had begun to sink, slowly at first, then faster, as though the ice beneath it had melted into a black, endless pool. The survivors shuffled closer to the edge, still chanting without sound, their mouths working in grotesque silence. On. By one, they stepped into the pit, vanishing into the dark. No splash, no scream, just gone. Ramirez gagged. "They're feeding it." The last to step forward was the woman with the torn parka. She paused at the edge, head turning toward us. For a moment I thought I saw something human flicker behind her black eyes. Then she smiled, cracked, bloody, and let herself fall. The shadow figure inhaled again, long and deliberate, like it was savoring the offering. Anders broke. He shoved past us, sprinting for the tunnel. His lamp beam swung wildly, carving light through the dark. "Anders, wait!" I called, but he was gone, swallowed by the narrow passage. A moment later, his scream came back, distant, choked, then silence. I clenched my jaw, forcing my legs to move. "We can't stay here! Move!" We plunged into the tunnel, the chamber behind us pulsing with unnatural light. The air grew thicker, colder, pressing against our lungs like a hand. My head swam with whispers, snatches of language I couldn't understand yet almost recognized, curling like frost inside my skull. By the time we reached the ridge again, the storm outside had risen. Snow whipped across the open ice, erasing all trace of our footprints. Holt slammed a glove against his radio. Static screamed back at him. No signal. Ramirez bent double, gasping. "We're not supposed to leave." I looked back once, at the black mouth of the cave glowing faintly in the distance. The light inside pulsed like a heartbeat, and I realized Ramirez was right. We hadn't escaped. We'd been released. The storm swallowed us whole. Snow tore across the ridge in furious sheets, the wind howling so loud it drowned even our own voices. Our helmet lamps cut only a few feet ahead before vanishing into white. The cave was gone behind us, erased by the blizzard. We huddled together, shouting to be heard. Holt's voice carried first. "We need shelter, or we're dead." Ramirez's teeth chattered audibly. The wreck. We can make it back to the fuselage." I shook my head, breath frosting against my mask. "No, we're not going back to that place." Holt's glare cut through the snow. "Then where?" Before I could answer, a shape loomed in the whiteness, black against the storm. At first I thought it was another ridge, but as we staggered closer, the lines sharpened. A structure. An outpost. The building crouched low against the ice, half buried, its metal siding rusted and torn by decades of storms. No lights, no smoke from vents. It looked abandoned, but in the Arctic, even ruins could mean survival. We forced the door open against a drift of snow. The hinges screamed. Inside, the air was stale and metallic, warmer only by degrees. My lamp beam swept across stacked supply crates, broken cots, and frost-caked instruments that hadn't been touched in years. Ramirez collapsed onto a crate, clutching his knees. "We'll wait out the storm. Radio might still work." Holt prowled the room, rifle raised. "Doesn't feel empty." He was right. The silence here wasn't relief. It was taut, waiting. I moved toward a console near the wall, brushing snow from a dead monitor. My glove froze mid-swipe. Carved into the metal surface were the same spirals we'd seen in the cave. Not etched by tools, burned in, blackened grooves that stank faintly of ozone. Ramirez saw it too, his face drained. "It's been here, whatever that thing is. It's been here." A bang echoed through the outpost, sharp enough to rattle the walls. Holt spun, weapon leveled. The sound had come from the hall beyond the main room. We followed cautiously, boots crunching on frozen grit. The hallway stretched long and narrow, lined with doors. At the end, one door stood ajar. A dim glow seeped through the crack. I pushed it open. The room beyond was lined with bunks. On each one lay a figure, motionless beneath thin blankets. Frost clung to their eyelashes, their lips cracked and blue. For a moment, I thought they were dead. Then one opened its eyes, pupils black, skin pale as carved ice. The figure sat up in a stiff, mechanical motion, and the others followed one by one until a dozen pairs of black eyes locked on us in perfect unison. Ramirez stumbled back, whispering prayers. The air shifted. The storm's howl outside dimmed, replaced by a deeper sound, the groan of ice shifting beneath unimaginable weight. My chest seized with it, ribs tightening as though squeezed from within. The survivors in the bunks rose to their feet. No one spoke. They didn't need to. Their silence carried the weight of command. Holt's voice broke first. "They followed us here." I knew better. My stomach twisted as I realized the truth. They didn't follow. I swallowed hard, staring into those endless black eyes. We were brought. The bunk room stank of frozen breath and decay, though none of the bodies had moved beyond rising to their feet. They stood in rows, silent, as though waiting for instruction. Their black eyes reflected our lamps like pools of oil. "Back," Holt whispered, rifle up, slowly. But when we stepped toward the door, they stepped too, mirroring us with eerie precision. Their boots crunched in unison. No sound left their lips, but the air vibrated as though filled with hidden whispers. Ramirez's composure cracked. "They're not people anymore," he hissed. "They're conduits." I didn't ask conduits for what, I already knew. The groaning beneath the floor came again, louder this time, accompanied by a faint shiver through the walls. It wasn't the storm outside. It was deeper, resonant, as if the ice sheet itself were alive and breathing. Holt's jaw set. He lifted his rifle higher. "If they come closer, I shoot." But before he could act, the figures moved first, not to attack, but to kneel, collapsing in perfect sequence, one after another, until the entire row of them bowed their heads toward the floor. Their hands pressed against the ice, fingers splayed, as if offering themselves to something far below. Then the whispers became words. Not English, not any language I knew. Yet I understood. Open, return, feed. The meaning struck me like a fist in the chest. My knees buckled. Ramirez gasped beside me, clutching his skull. Holt fought it longer, teeth gritted, but the tremor in his hands betrayed him. "They're calling it," I managed to whisper. The floor between the bunks cracked. A jagged line spread, glowing faintly blue like lightning trapped in the ice. The survivors pressed harder against it, their bodies trembling in anticipation. Ramirez bolted. He tore from the room, screaming, boots hammering down the hall. Holt swore and followed, covering our retreat. I ambled after them, head swimming with alien syllables that refused to leave my skull. We crashed back into the main chamber of the outpost. The storm still howled outside, but the sound felt thin now, distant. The real noise came from below, the steady grinding shift of something immense stirring. Ramirez slammed against the radio console, twisting dials with frozen hands. Static screamed, rose, then warped into a voice. Not his voice, not mine. The same words from the bunk room, spoken in layered tones that didn't belong to a human throat. Open, return, feed. He staggered back, eyes wide, as if the machine itself had just bitten him. Holt fired his rifle into the ceiling. The gunshot shattered the trance, if only for a heartbeat. "Enough!" he roared. "We're leaving, now!" We forced the outer door open. The storm clawed at us instantly, dragging snow through the gap. But the blizzard was no longer empty. It carried shapes. Dark silhouettes flickered in the white, tall and crooked, their movements just slow enough to seem deliberate. "They're waiting," I breathed. Ramirez shook his head violently. No, this isn't weather. This is it. The storm is it." The wind shrieked in reply, words buried in the gale. Not imagination, not madness. Real, intelligible voices carried on the storm itself. They were singing. Holt yanked me into the snow. "Move!" We stumbled into the white void, the outpost vanishing behind us. But the song followed. And I realized it wasn't a warning. It was a welcome. The storm didn't let us go. It wrapped around us like a living thing, pushing, pulling, steering us deeper into the white. Every direction looked the same, yet somehow we knew we weren't moving blind. We were being led. Ramirez staggered ahead, muttering prayers through cracked lips. Holt gripped my arm, keeping me upright when the wind shoved me sideways. His strength felt mechanical now, less human will and more stubborn refusal to yield. Then the ground fell away. We stumbled onto the lip of a vast depression carved into the ice, a crater so deep its bottom glowed with faint bluish light. Snow swirled down into it, vanishing into that unnatural radiance. The storm circled the pit like a crown of thorns. Ramirez dropped to his knees. "God help us. That's where it lives." The voices in the gale swelled louder, urging us forward. My skull thrummed with them. Open, return, feed. At the center of the crater, jagged remnants of another wreck jutted from the ice. Not the plane we'd found earlier. Something older, metal twisted by time, nearly fossilized in frost. But its design was wrong, curves and angles that bent the eye, shapes that felt more grown than built. Holt spat into the snow. "That's not ours." Before I could answer, the ice beneath the wreck groaned, splitting with a sound like mountains breaking. The glow intensified, spreading through fractures that raced outward in spiderwebs. The pit was opening. From the fissures, a smell poured forth. Cold rot, iron tang, and something sweet. Nauseatingly sweet, like overripe fruit left too long in the sun. It coated my tongue, stuck in my throat. Ramirez screamed suddenly, clutching his head. He lurched to his feet and began stumbling down into the crater. Holt lunged, grabbing him, but Ramirez fought like a man possessed. "They're calling me," he shrieked. "It wants me. It needs me." I grabbed Holt's arm. "Let him go!" We both knew the truth. Ramirez was already gone. Holt's grip faltered, and Ramirez tore free, staggering into the light. His silhouette wavered in the glow until he seemed to dissolve, absorbed into the fissures. The ground convulsed, snow and ice split wide, and something vast shifted beneath, a ripple running through the crater like a muscle flexing under skin. Then came the eye. It rose from the ice, impossibly large, lidless, its surface glistening with frost. Not an orb of flesh, but something crystalline, facets shifting like a frozen jewel. Yet inside it burned awareness, raw and endless. The sight speared through me, pinning me where I stood. Images flooded my mind. Cities drowned in black seas, Skies split open by storms, endless fields of bone-white ice littered with human wreckage. Not prophecy, memory. This thing had been here long before us. Holt raised his rifle, screaming against the wind. He fired, bullets sparking uselessly against the crystalline surface. The eye did not blink. Instead, the ice cracked further, and a mouth began to open below it. Rows of jagged black ice formed teeth, and from that abyss came a sound that wasn't heard, but felt, like the earth itself exhaling after centuries of hunger. I clutched Holt's sleeve, voice raw. "We can't fight it. We can only run." But even as I said it, I knew the truth. There was nowhere left to run. The maw yawned wider, a chasm splitting the pit from end to end. Light poured upward, pale and cold, bleaching Holt's face into a mask of stone. The air vibrated with that impossible exhalation, a soundless roar rattling through my ribs. "We can't outrun it," I said. My own words felt foreign, drowned beneath the storm's chorus. Holt's eyes narrowed. He jammed a fresh magazine into his rifle with trembling hands. "Then we make it choke." I almost laughed, not from humor but despair. What could bullets do to something older than ice, older than memory itself? Yet his defiance sparked a flame in me, however faint. The ground lurched again, knocking us to our knees. The crystalline eye swiveled, fixing us in its gaze. I felt it peel me open, stripping away my memories like pages torn from a book. Childhood laughter, my mother's face, every moment drained into its endless dark. "No!" I screamed, slamming my palms against my skull as though I could hold myself together. "You don't get that!" The voices in the storm faltered. For the first time, the chant wavered. Holt seized his chance. He raised the rifle and fired not at the eye, but at the wreckage embedded in the ice. Metal shrieked, sparks ignited, and one jagged section tore free, tumbling into the glowing fissure. The creature shuddered. The light faltered. "It's bound to the wreck," Holt yelled over the storm. "That's its anchor." I scrambled to my feet, adrenaline drowning my fear. Together we heaved at twisted beams, kicking and wrenching until more shards broke loose, tumbling into the pit. The fissures cracked wider, the glow bleeding brighter, and the storm howled in fury. The eye convulsed, facets splintering like glass. Beneath it, the maw snapped shut with a thunderclap. The earth shook violently, nearly pitching us into the crater. From below came a scream. No human sound, no animal cry, but the raw voice of something that had been denied, a sound of hunger unmet. The storm broke. Snow fell straight again, silent and soft, as if the world had drawn one ragged breath and held it. The crater dimmed, its glow fading until only black cracks remained. Holt collapsed onto the ice, chest heaving. His rifle lay beside him, barrel steaming. I dropped too, numb with exhaustion, my body trembling uncontrollably. We sat in silence for what could have been minutes or hours. The wind carried only emptiness now. Finally, Holt spoke, voice ragged. "We stopped it." I wanted to believe him, but the cracks in the ice still pulsed faintly, like veins carrying a heartbeat too deep to silence. When rescue came, days later, or maybe weeks, I couldn't tell them the truth. They found Holt frostbitten but alive, me half delirious, clinging to stories that didn't make sense even to my own ears. A plane crash, a storm, survivors who weren't. We were flown back to warmth, to safety. Yet even there, in hospital corridors and crowded debriefing rooms, I heard the storm. Sometimes only faint, like wind against glass. Other times, full and clear. The chant, the command. Open, return, feed. The Arctic hadn't let us go. It had marked us, branded us as part of its memory. And when I close my eyes at night, I see that crystalline eye beneath the ice, watching, waiting, remembering.